Cuba is right in the middle of some very serious protests, something that is sort of capturing the world because this has not happened for quite some time. Now, every time I talk about Cuba, I tend to sort of irritate certain people out there, and I understand I'm probably going to do that again. The interesting thing with Cuba is they really don't like it when you get it wrong. And I think this is such a beautiful thing about their culture and sort of about my experience. Now, I went down to Cuba, which is why I'm sort of going to be talking about it from that framework. But what I want to do is share my experience, right? I am not Cuban. I am somebody who just went down there for a very short while, but I learned a lot about the country, and I learned a lot about the culture, and I learned a lot about, I think, some of the interface between Cuba, which is not far from the United States, and the United States, and sort of how our two countries interface. And so as I've been watching this protest, sort of this kind of, this spontaneous sort of demonstration taking place throughout Cuba, I've been following it closely and remembering back to my trip down there. And this was right in 2016, sort of when I had a lot of other things going on in my life. But I want to share with you, some of that. Before we get there, though, here is how the current media is framing a lot of this. So let's start off by going to Twitter, and we'll notice that on Twitter, if you're not a Twitter user, it's kind of a big place where a lot of people will aggregate their news. And so I reference it a lot because a lot of the political conversations are happening here. But if you were on Twitter earlier today, then you would notice that in their trending section, which happens to be on the right side, that they said protests take place across Cuba as the country faces shortages of COVID vaccines. And so you go, oh, well, that's what they're upset about? COVID vaccines? That's what these protests are about? They're sort of missing some of the jabs. Okay, so that's one way to frame it, right? That's on Twitter. They also say, and basic necessities, sort of as an afterthought. And so, this stuff is being generated by the Twitter overlords. So they posted, of course, that the protests are taking place because they're facing shortages of the COVID-19 vaccines. And they say thousands took to the streets in Havana and other cities to demand vaccines and food on Sunday as the country faces a period of economic crisis brought on by the global COVID pandemic. So, it's just sort of, what do you lead with in a situation like this? Do you lead with, there's protests, there's sort of, uprising, there's a lot of social unrest, people are angry about a lot of different things. We got multiple variables. Which one do we start off with? It could be, I don't know, people are upset that they don't have freedom or liberty or democracy, that they've been oppressed under a totalitarian communist dictator for the last 40, 60 years, whatever it is. It could be that. Or it could just be COVID vaccines, right? It could be one or the other. And we're already in I would say, probably max hyperventilation mode when it comes to vaccines now in America. And so, it's easy for the Twitter bots and the overlords over there to just suddenly they're spring loaded. It's vaccines, everything that is a problem now. Oh, they don't have the vaccine. Oh, my Uber's late. Well, they probably are getting vaccinated, so we're going to excuse that. Oh, my food's terrible. Well, the cook probably didn't get vaccinated, right? So so go ask him, send Kamala Harris back into the kitchen, knock on the door, and see if maybe she can get him a shot. So it's always about the vaccine. Everything is about the vaccine. And so Twitter, of course, is saying that, the poor Cuban people, they just don't have enough shots. Never mind those little things like freedom and liberty and democracy and some, basic human rights, none of that stuff. So we saw a lot of that out there, and we're going to get back to that because we have an official White House person who is corroborating that, confirming that sort of lineage of characterization or mischaracterization. But let's think about this from a different perspective. And so we can go, and when we're not sort of living in Silicon Valley with Twitter, we can go over to the Miami Herald, which is a little bit closer to the activity, and we can see how they're framing it. So now they're telling us that they're fed up, right? Cubans are fed up. These videos show protesters demanding change. Now, you'll notice that it says, this was written here by Adriana Brasileiro, says, dozens of videos posted on social media captured demonstrations across Cuba on Sunday as protesters demanded freedom. There you go. And they called for an end of the communist dictatorship on the island, right? So a little bit different than the COVID vaccine. Now, the Twitter people were saying it's all the COVID vaccine, and they're saying, we're demanding freedom. Okay, we're demanding an end of the communist dictatorship on the island. If we get vaccines that's a part of democracy, we'll take them. But, first and foremost, we want to prioritize the things that actually matter. Protesters there chanted freedom and Patria y Vida, which means Homeland and Life, in a reference to the revolutionary slogan Patria or Muerte, which means homeland or death. it has become the battle cry during the protests that have gained steam since last year when the San Isidro movement, a collective of artists protesting against political repression on the island, began to publicly call for increased freedoms, right? And we're talking about increased freedoms. And so at the beginning of this segment, I was sort of inartful by sort of talking about me attempting to characterize Cuba, right? And I certainly don't want to botch my historical understanding of the country, because I really don't know it intimately enough to sort of really comment intellectually, I would say, on the underpinnings, historically speaking. And so I'm not going to attempt to do that. I think it's a beautiful country. There are amazing people there. And I just want to share a little bit of my experience. I did go down there in 2016, and I want to just kind of take you through some pictures. And the reason I went down there, as part of this organization, our law firm here at the R&R Law Group was very young at the time. We just founded this firm in 2014, and we joined this organization that was going to help teach us, how to run a business and be better business owners and entrepreneurs. Of course, we went to law school. We didn't go to business school. One of the first things that I sort of recognized is how little I knew about business, about sort of, I have an instinctual grasp and understanding because I grew up, cleaning pools with my dad, turned into constructing pools, worked with my mom a lot. I started a lemonade stand when I could basically stand out on the side of the street corner. And so I've always sort of had that little bit of a bug, but I've always known that coaching and, sort of retreats and seminars and learning is kind of a superpower. And it absolutely has been that in my case. Knowing what I don't know and then going out there and trying to seek that information has been extremely, extremely powerful. And, I wish more people would sort of recognize that. I try to tell people that all the time. But anyways, we were part of this organization. And one of the things that this organization did, they were very expensive. One of the things that they did was we went on these sort of adult field trips, right, to sort of see the world a little bit and give ourselves experiences that maybe we wouldn't sort of voluntarily undertake. Like, for example, going to Cuba right after Cuba is opens up back during the Obama administration, and it's kind of a mess, right? It's kind of tumultuous down there a little bit. And so as part of this organization, my business partner and I, we packed up, went down to Cuba. We spent about, I think, 8 or 9 days down there. And the whole experience was really, really transformative for me. I have been to other parts of the world. I've been to China. I've been to Shanghai and Beijing. I've been to Germany. I've been to France. I've been to Italy. I've been very extremely fortunate that I've been able to travel around the world because it's such an important thing, I think, for me developing my worldview. But Cuba was a different experience. I mean, this was a situation where I went to an environment that was just kind of outright communism, and they've been living that way for a long period of time. China is a little bit different. In China, it was certainly sort of a communist, hierarchy over kind of an overarching umbrella. But there were little pockets of capitalism. There were Starbucks over there and things like that in Shanghai. So in Cuba, it was a different experience. Let's get into the pictures. Enough of the background. So I want to show you this. Now, I'm not proud of this picture at all. All right. Wearing actually a blue shirt that looks just like this, but I look a little bit different. All right. Let's take a look at what's going on here. So this is where we landed in the airport. This is Aeropuerto Internacional Jose Marti La Habana, which is in Havana. And we landed there, and you can see me. One of the first things we did, this was back during my drinking days, little bit puffy in the face over there. You can see around the midsection, put on had some extra LBs going on over there. And as soon as we got off the plane, one of the first things that everybody did, we were part of this little tour here. We all got mojitos, right? And so it was something that was fun. Here's my business partner and I don't talk, and sort of a, kind of a private guy. He's joined us on the trip. Of course, he and I went. We are the R&R Law Group together. And so we're having a good time down there. You can see, right, little bit of a puffiness over there, a little extra pork a little bit, but we had a great time. It was a lot of fun. It was a very, very educational experience. And I just want to show you some pictures because there's a couple things I want to point out about Cuba. And this is a shot that we had when we first got to our hotel. And so it's a beautiful country, right? A lot of greenery, very hot, very humid. We went sort of, during one of the hottest times of the year, of course. And you can see some of it can be extremely beautiful, right? Like, look at the pristine painting here. Now, I wanted to show you this picture because this sort of illustrates something that happens in Cuba. In Cuba, there are very interesting separations between sort of people taking care of certain things. So the analogy that I was thinking of when I was trying to think about how do I explain this is there are certain people in your neighborhood, right? You have a lawn and your grass kind of goes over into the neighbor's yard, right? A little bit, but it kind of makes sense if you just cut that extra patch. So it goes up to their driveway, and that way you kind of, when you're cutting the grass, it doesn't look weird, right? And then you have that one neighbor that just says, I'm not going to cut that extra like 2 feet. I'm only going to cut my grass. And then you have this sort of weird, like, oh, that's my side of the bed, and that's your side of the bed, and I'm only going to manage my side of the street, and you can manage your side of the street. And so you have these kind of hard divisions, right? Where somebody just says, I'm going to do the work all the way up until this line right here, and then it's not my problem anymore. Sort of, the winner of the Not My Problem Award. And because in Cuba, basically everything is owned by the government, right? Everything is communism. You see this happen. You see these very strange divisions at very interesting points in places that you may not ordinarily see here in the United States. And to be fair, we do have different pockets of sort of places where we have, nice, newer, modern facilities. And then we have older areas that have sort of been neglected and forgotten about. But in Cuba, it's almost like in the same house that will happen. Like one room will be, because certain people are staying in that room, one room will be great, right? They'll take very good care of it. But because the house was divided in communism, because they just gave the room to somebody, the next room next door to somebody else, and maybe they didn't care about that room, you'll actually have pieces of property where people are taking care of one component of it, one side of it, and totally neglecting the other side of the property. So let's take a look at how this works in some pictures. And so I want to show you this, right? This looks very nice, very nicely manicured area. This grass is pristine as heck. You can see very nicely mowed. And you'll notice that in this building, this green building here, paint looks great, right, on the inside of this perimeter. Now, right outside, this fence looks pretty terrible. Like everything has just been sort of neglected there. And here you have very pristine, nice, sort of empty building, all white paint and green, very, very nicely painted. Now, you'll see this in certain areas, right? This whole pocket, this whole corridor looks very nice because this was sort of the nice, kind of richer area. And you'll see that there are just certain segments of the same property line that just get neglected. Okay, so somebody's taking care of the house, but the entire property is being neglected. Why? Well, because nobody really cares about that property, because nobody really has an ownership interest. Now, you'll see different parts of Cuba that look like this, and you'll see different parts that kind of look like this, right on the back end, right on the other side of something that might be pristine. You literally just have kind of segments of the buildings that just kind of just fall off. And I mean literally, they're just gone. And it's just because people sort of stopped caring about certain portions of the property. And when we were on a tour and we were sort of poking around in Cuba, and they essentially were saying that at one point in time, people did have some ownership rights, some property interests, and I talk a lot about property here. And at one point when there was the revolution, they just said, oh, okay, well, your house is not yours anymore, right? It's now community property. And so you're sitting there, you're saying, well, it's Rob and Rob's Cuban fiance at the time, and we're down there and we own the property, and we're going to have a nice family, and we need 5 bedrooms. So we have a house that has 5 bedrooms, but it's just her and I, and we're going to be planning for some little, children running around and all of that stuff. And there's a revolution, and then the government comes in and they just say, oh, well, it's just you two in here. There's only 2 of you. So what do you need 5 bedrooms for? That's ridiculous. That's insane. That's way too much room for you. We have other people out there who also need a place to live. And so guess what? Your house is not yours anymore. You get 1 room because you two only need 1, right? You have plenty of space. You don't need it. And we're just going to give the other rooms, the other 4 rooms in your house, to everybody else who needs it. And so other people would come into the end of the property, and everybody goes, well, you don't want people sort of out there just living on the streets, do you? We don't want a bunch of homeless people out there like we've got in California. And so this is the humanitarian thing to do. We've got space, and I guess that's fine. So you can just come on in, and you can get that room, and you get that room, and you get that room. Well, what happens is now you've got communism, right? We've got one shared asset that kind of everybody's responsible for. So what happens then if you've got 5 people there and they've all got 5 rooms, but something in the kitchen breaks? Who's responsible for that? Well, it's kind of everybody's. And when it's kind of everybody's, it's kind of nobody's. And so nobody takes care of the communal property because people are not incentivized to do so. Because we all know how this works. If you ever went to college and had roommates, you know that nobody ever voluntarily does the dishes, right? Or actually goes and refills the beer or the milk or whatever you need, right? Everybody sort of kind of takes what they need and puts a little bit back, but not the full extent of it. And so what ends up happening over the years is this same cycle where you have no property ownership. You literally see buildings just kind of start falling apart because people will take care of their room, but not the rest of the building. And you'll notice this in this image. I wanted to show you this one. I mean, this is a perfect example of it. So we were at a restaurant here. We were eating in this building. And so let me move myself up here. You can see here in literally the division line, okay, it happens right here. So all of this used to be one building. It was all part of the same structure. And this part of the property on the left side was given to somebody who was essentially an entrepreneur. Okay, this was an entrepreneur over here in Cuba, and that's going to be the moral of this entire story. Is in Cuba, it's a communist dictatorship, but there are a lot of entrepreneurs. There are a lot of capitalists. And when they get their hands on a little bit of assets, they turn it into something beautiful. And this is exactly what happened here. This person basically got this part of the building and she turned it into this beautiful thing, right? Very well cared for. It is painted. It's crisp. It's well maintained. It looks great. And we had a restaurant. We had dinner in there. We had actually, I think it was lunch when we were in there. But the rest of the building, this was all built together, has just fallen apart, right? And as soon as the roof breaks, the family moves out, and the rest of the building just falls apart. And if you were going to, fix this up or do something with it, well, you can't. It's not yours. It's not your property. And so the rest of it just dilapidates, and buildings literally fall apart sort of at the seams, and they will repair it and sort of reassemble it. You can see it almost building by building. Okay, see how this building is just sort of dilapidated and falling apart, whereas you've got these buildings over here that are sort of nice and painted and well maintained. This one is painted and maintained, whereas this one over here is just not. And you just see the same thing happening all throughout the country. And it's it was a very interesting experience, because also in Cuba, you just can't kind of go to the store and buy some eggs and buy some milk. Everything is rationed, and there are quotas and there are all sorts of rules and regulations. So we were a part of this group, and what we would do is go and we would have dinner from time to time. And I want to show you how this works. So you don't go to a regular restaurant in Cuba. People have their homes that they will convert into these makeshift restaurants. And so I want to show you what one looks like. This is where we had dinner one night, and this was somebody's, essentially their home. And she had turned this was the woman here, had turned this in, and this was somebody helping, turn this into where we were having dinner. And there were certain restrictions, she told us, on how many seats you could have to serve dinner for. And so she could only have certain number of people at any given time. And so what this woman did, same woman who had the balcony that I was showing you, she was taking very good care of her property. She had seats outside there as well. And when government regulators would come in, they would stack the chairs and they would put them back in this closet because they couldn't have that many seats. Okay, they were not allowed to serve that many people because that would have meant that they were over quota and they were getting more resources than they were entitled to somehow. And so the government wants to keep that strong of control over the markets. And so what these people were doing, I mean, I'm not joking you, and I'm not going to out this woman, that's why her face is not in here, is essentially running bootleg capitalist organizations, because she's running a restaurant. It's all being done sort of on the black market. Okay, we're sort of paying in different monetary fees. Right, I didn't manage the tour, but she would tell us that the whole thing it was like sneaking us in and sneaking. It was a weird experience. And she would tell us that because our group was so big, that technically we were sort of, violating certain things. And she had different chairs, but they had to, essentially, she said at one point, throw the chairs over the balcony when the regulators came because they had too many seats. They're not allowed to do that. And you're going, this is crazy. What kind of world is this? And it's legitimate. So let me show you this. This is one of the cards that I took a picture of down there. It said Control de Ventas para Productos Alimenticios. So this is control for the purchase of products or food products, right? They have these little cards that they have where they've got these documents that it's not an ID card, but when you open it up, it will literally give you your rations. Okay. And I took a picture of this. We were in a tour bus going somewhere. So I think this is milk, fresh milk. This is, I think, pasta or bread in a pan, right, for bread. And so you go there and you just go and you get your food handed out in rations. And it was such an interesting experience. And so, everybody's sort of transacting under the layer of government, right? There's this layer of government that they say we have all these controls on top of everything that you do, literally. If you want milk, if you want eggs, if you want bread, you got to come through us to get it. But then there's all of these people that are sort of living in this capitalist system, more or less, underneath, right? They're bartering and they're transacting and they're running their own little companies. Wild. Now, one of the big interesting things that many people see often in Cuba are the cars, right? We talk a lot about the cars, and we spend a lot of time kind of looking at these things and studying how this works, right? A big lesson that I drew from this thing was just how fortunate we are here in America that we don't have to deal with a lot of these same totalitarian tendencies. But here's a picture of my business partner and I in one of these cars that is, you probably see sort of, bouncing around in Cuba. So this is us, right? We're driving around in one of these classic cars. And I want to introduce you to this guy who actually would restore them, right? So we went to his shop. Right? This guy is an entrepreneur through and through, both of them. They're both mechanics. They both have this shop. And what he does is he gets these old, beautiful cars and fixes them up, right? And what is so interesting about this is on the outside, it looks great. You're like, wow, that's beautiful. I'd love to ride in one of those, right? How wild, how fun. But this is kind of essentially all they've got, right? This is it. They're not importing anything over there. So one of the most interesting things that I learned was when you look at the inside of these cars, they're totally Frankensteins. So let's take a look here. Total Frankenstein car, okay? This is what the inside of one of them looks like, right? They're just cobbling this together from all sorts of different stuff, right? This is a dashboard from Lord knows what, steering wheel from some Nissan, the entire, event. This is not a 1950s, 40s, 60s car, right? This looks like you can plug an iPod into it with modern air conditioning and Lord knows what else. And it was just a weird experience. The way that they put these cars together is they literally smuggle these pieces in on airplanes. And so they were showing us pictures of them bringing, carburetors or something as checked luggage, and they would wrap the sort of exhaust pipe and they would cut it in half and then have to re-weld it when it got down in Cuba. And then they'd assemble all these cars and they would turn them into these little tourist things. And these guys would give rides to tourists from all over the world and they would generate revenue off of that. And so it was very, very interesting. Here's another picture from another one of these body shops, okay, where they would just take all of these different motorcycles and they would cannibalize them essentially and then repurpose them. And they just can't, they can't just order some parts in from America or from anywhere because of a lot of the sanctions and embargoes. Here was a picture of some students out there. I think this was outside one of the universities. Yeah, the University of Havana is there. And so a beautiful, beautiful place to sort of poke around at. Here is from inside of an official cigar store. Of course, we've got the Castros sort of front and center, loud and proud. Very proud of everything. And then a couple more pictures before we get into it, right? This is another street that we were walking down, right? Very beautiful architecture, kind of dark, right? Some parts not particularly lit, but just kind of dead, right? Dead everywhere you go. No businesses, no capitalism, nobody's selling anything, right? Not many, people on the streets doing much of anything, right in the middle of Havana. And what would be, as I said, all of these things are sort of kind of bootleg setups. So as we're walking down this street, then suddenly where the heck are we going before we get finally to our restaurant, right? So somebody just kind of off one of these corners just has this little secret hidden restaurant and you just kind of open the doors, you tuck right in there, they serve you food, they give you wine, and you have a whole experience there. And it's all just done kind of secretly, right? And those people are paid in cash and the whole thing is just very interesting. Now it's also a beautiful country. Okay. This is from part of the area where the protests are. And now we're going to get into the news. Now I just wanted to frame that out just to sort of show you what that experience was like. It's a beautiful country. The people were incredible. We met so many amazing people. Everybody wanted to help and just learn a little bit more about what we did and about some of the freedoms that we have in our country. And there were capitalists all over the place. The car guy was a capitalist. The restaurateur was a capitalist. Everybody was a capitalist. They all just wanted to get a piece of something and make it better. And I talk a lot about this on the channel, about, about people needing to feel useful, and about us creating value in the world by finding something that is of lower utility, finding something that is a natural resource, mixing our labor with it, and then creating something of value, right? And we call that property, and we protect our property rights for good reason. Because if we don't, then what happens is people stop caring about stuff. If you give people just everything, then they just look at it and they say, well, this is very great, but why should I appreciate that? Because you just gave that to me out of thin air. It's not worthwhile. And Cuba, for me, was a prime example of that. People were given places to live and they neglected it. Other people that had to fight and earn it and work for it and are thriving as capitalists in a communist country, it was one of the most inspiring things I've ever seen. I came back to the United States with a lot of stinking energy because, as angry as I get with a lot of what we see going on in this country, we don't have it nearly as bad as they do, and they're making do, and they're building businesses, and they're providing for their kids. And so I got to just, I just wanted to share that with you. It was a beautiful trip. We have a beautiful country, and sometimes we lose sight of it. It makes me very happy to see that maybe Cuba is going to get a little bit more of that, and I certainly want to support them in their quest. So speaking of that, let's take a look and figure out what is going on there. So this was posted over on Twitter. He says, this is exciting. And so this is, if you'll notice, right, very, very close to where I was. And so this is a picture that I took when I was traveling in one of those cars, driving across the seaside. And now they're right there, right? They're sort of filling this area up. Let's take a listen in and watch the crowd. Now, this might be a little bit loud, so just be forewarned. Okay, so crowd, looking a little thin there, but it starts to fill up as sort of the day went on. Another Twitter user posted this as, Havana explodes to the cry of freedom. He says, this is at Malecon at the moment. The story, SOS Cuba, let's not stop. Years ago, something like this didn't look this exciting, right? And so he's talking about freedom. He's talking about Save Cuba, and he's saying this is our moment. Don't see much vaccine talk there, though, but let's see what's going on now. So I think they're saying Libertad, Libertad, right? And here's another image of them shouting Homeland and Life. Cubans turn the revolutionary slogan on their head, this says, as they call for democracy. And so here are some more Cubans sort of, protesting, right? Fighting for freedom. Love it. All right. So, as is always the case, well, the government has to respond. So here's this next video. This one, they get a little bit rough, but I don't think this necessitates a full content warning. But the Cubans are responding, and then we're going to break down what's happening because Joe Biden came out today and he gave us his perspective, and we have Jen Psaki who gave us her perspective. We're going to hear from Marco Rubio and Dan Crenshaw as well. Let's take a look, though. These are Cuba's special forces, so now they're going to be sort of, exercising the big hand of government, as is usually the case. They kind of, these people are everywhere.
Sale. Con un asabuco sí te pueden meter en línea. Quelle perché o siamo play.
So gearing up, right? We're going to see what the response looks like, and hopefully it is not violent. Hopefully it's not, but we know how these things tend to go in communist, totalitarian dictatorships. So lots of prayers with the Cuban people tonight and for the foreseeable future. How has the Biden administration responded to this? Good question. We have Julie Chung over here. Julie Chung is the acting assistant secretary to the U.S. Department of State. Now, she is with the Bureau of Western Hemisphere hemisphere affairs, which is perfect because that's exactly where Cuba is. And let's see what she has to say. She says, peaceful protests are growing in Cuba as the Cuban people exercise their right to peaceful assembly to express concern about rising COVID cases and deaths and medicine shortages. Oh, we commend the numerous efforts of the Cuban people mobilizing donations to help neighbors in need. All right, so let's trash this statement for a minute. Peaceful protests are growing in Cuba as they exercise their right to peaceful assembly. So you can read this in two ways, right? The first way is that this person is just very naive and doesn't know what they're talking about and is extending what they perceive to be, American freedoms to other places in the world where those freedoms don't exist anymore. And we've seen this historically, which is why I tend to think this is probably the right answer, which is that she thinks that sort of everybody just has everything that we have naturally, and that therefore they should be comporting to our demands. And what I mean by that is we've seen this with AOC. She did this very recently. She said that in Puerto Rico, I believe, when she was talking about them, saying that they just need to turn off their coal power. Just turn it off. The planet is dying and you have to turn off your coal power plants. And if you don't, well, then you're going to be contributing to the death of the planet. And so the Puerto Ricans just say, hey, AOC, that's like our entire power grid. Okay, we don't have any other alternative to that. That's all that we've got. So how about no, right? We know that you grew up in a silver spoon, America suburb somewhere, but it's different down here. And so please don't project your presumptions of certain standards onto us. And so totally, irresponsible, totally, I think, naive and kind of idiotic, really. If you're an elected official, should be a little bit more educated than that. Same concept goes over to Julie Chung. They don't have a right to peaceful assembly in Cuba. Okay, that's the whole point. That's why this is a big deal, because they don't have that right. We do. We used to. And it's slowly eroding away right in front of our eyes. But it is not something that is permitted in Cuba, which is why people are concerned about this. And I'll tell you, it's certainly not. I didn't hear a single person in any one of those videos that we played ever complaining about COVID vaccines. Okay, not a one. Not one of them. But she wants to characterize it as that. Now, the other way, if you want to be, I think, diplomatic about it, or let's say put this in the light most favorable to her, is saying it would be the presumption that all people have a right to peaceful assembly, right? So sort of talking about this not in actuality, but in idyllic terms. So ideally, everybody has the right to peaceful assembly. Or if you want to approach it from a humanitarian perspective, we all have the right to peaceful assembly. It's a God-given right. It's a fundamental human right. That's why we say it's in the First Amendment, right? Free exercise, free assembly, all of that. So it's very, very possible that that's what she meant. But I doubt it, because she's also wrong on the COVID stuff, isn't she? So it's an interesting way to frame this. It's peaceful assembly, which they don't have, and they're all very concerned about COVID cases, and they're commending them and all this stuff. It's basically nonsense, as Marco Rubio says. He says, this is a ridiculous tweet from the State Department. He says, people in Cuba are protesting 62 years of socialism, lies, tyranny, and misery. They're not expressing concern about rising COVID cases and deaths. Why is it so hard for POTUS and the people in his administration to say that? He's right about that. He is totally right about it. They can't just say it. It's because it's too close to home. If they come out and say, if Jen Psaki comes out and says, yeah, you're right, communism is a terrible thing, you're going to have a big swath of the Democratic Party that just goes, what did you say? We don't like that statement. Because they're communists. God, that's why. That's why, Marco. Why is it so hard for his administration to say that? It's because they're communists, Marco Rubio. That's why. They don't want to dunk on themselves. That's why they're not going to say it. It's like when you do something stupid, you don't ever call attention to it. I tend to do that, but most normal people don't. Dan Crenshaw over here also says, no, they're chanting Libertad. They're not chanting COVID-19 vaccines in my arm, please. They're chanting Libertad. Stop playing cover for communists and support the Cuban people. My God, why is that so hard for you? It's true, folks. It is true. They can't acknowledge it, and they can't do it. Here's Jen Psaki. Here she is today. Press secretary, she defended Chung's tweet from the podium on Monday, saying that the Cuban people they could be discontent about a number of things like economic suppression, media suppression, lack of access to health and medical supplies, including vaccines, which is just wild to me because they have socialized medicine down there, don't they? Don't they have communist medicine? Didn't Michael Moore go down there and do a whole friggin' documentary about the whole thing? And now they're, medical. Oh, well, they don't have vaccines and medical supplies. That's weird. I wonder why that is. Wonder why that could possibly be. And so Jen and Biden come out and this is the same thing that Kamala did, right? When she went down to Guatemala. Don't come, Guatemalans. Oh, these people. It's so wild to me. All right, enough of that. Biden, to his credit, came out, read a statement that was, I think, the right way to read it. He came out, ABC News says that he backs Cuban protests as the island's president blames the imperialist provocation. So President Joe Biden on Monday stood in solidarity with thousands of Cubans who protested. Good for him. He spoke to reporters at the White House and said that these are remarkable protests, demanding their freedom from an authoritarian regime. And I've seen people on Twitter already dunking on that, like, oh, well, what about those January 6th protesters there, Joe? How about them? Viva, actually, I saw him throw that out there. He says, I don't think we've seen anything like this protest in a long, long time. If ever, the United States stands firmly with the Cuban people. He says he wants them to assert their universal rights, call on the government to refrain from violence in their attempts to silence the voice of the people of Cuba. So good for him, right? Good statement. Cuba's communist leadership has already denounced the protest as systemic provocation by Cuban dissidents and the U.S. government. So they're taking a note from the other communists around the world, like the Chinese, who they come over here and they say to our diplomats, at least this administration's diplomats, we didn't hear much of this during the last administration, but they would come over here like the Chinese delegation did when they were meeting with Anthony Blinken. And he said, well, we're very angry with what you're doing with the Uyghurs up there in your country. And they said, how dare you, sir? And they wagged their finger in his face, and he sort of scurried on out of there with his tail between his legs because they used the woke language back against them. And they don't like when that happens, right? Blinken and many people like to talk a lot about systemic everything being problematic. And then the communists come back and they say, oh, how about systemic provocation? What about that? And now if you are a lefty and you hear somebody accusing you of systemic anything, I think you malfunction. I think there's something short circuits up there. So it's powerful. The Cubans are pretty intelligent. Says that they are encouraged their supporters to counter protest. They sent its armed forces into the streets to clash with demonstrators. And so our sort of emasculated national security advisor over here, Jake Sullivan, says that the U.S. supports freedom of expression and assembly and would strongly condemn any violence or targeting of peaceful protesters who are exercising their universal rights, right? So he is supporting Julie Chung over here, and he's sort of picking up on her prior statement saying that this is now a universal right. Remember, she said that it was sort of, a right. He said, oh, it's universal. So he's helping to paper that one over for her a little bit. But nobody takes the administration's elected officials seriously at all. Here is a representative from the government of Cuba. You can see here, his name is Bruno Rodriguez. I think he's the chancellor, maybe, of Cuba. And he says, responding back to Jake Sullivan, he says, yeah, the White House National Security Advisor has no political or moral authority to speak about Cuba. His government has allocated hundreds of millions of dollars to promote subversion in our country, and he implements a genocidal blockade, which is the main cause of economic scarcities. So yet again, just throwing it right back in this administration's face. Every single one of them has done this. So it's not a surprise at all. All right, let's take a look at some questions coming in hot from over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Let's see who is here first. Let's go into some questions. I'm going to get this figured out over here. Yes. Oh, I think I got this figured out. Cool. We've got Speech Unleashed in the House says the current administration and the mainstream media doesn't value the freedom of the American people, so it isn't any surprise that they don't believe the lack of freedom is anything for the people of Cuba to be upset about. That comes over from Speech Unleashed. Good to see you there, Speech. We have another one from Thunder7. Says, hey, Rob, can we do a political prisoner swap? The January 6 MAGA prisoners sent to Cuba, where they will be treated better and be free in exchange for the Cuban protesters who want to live in the U.S. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's true, right? I mean, Jacob Chansley's sitting there in, I think, still isolation for the last 6 months. Probably fare better in Cuba. Good to see Thunder 7. We've got Soul Viking is in the house. Says, we know it's not primarily about the vaccines. However, the mainstream media must have forgotten Michael Moore's proclamations at the time that Cuba has the gold standard of healthcare. That was a lie then and probably not accurate now. Right. And I made that point, Soul. It's like, I thought it was perfect. So where did we go wrong? Because we're supposed to have healthcare that looks more like them, like theirs, not like ours. Right. All right, we've got, let's see, Anki Woe is in the house, says, perhaps if Cubans are realizing that if the USA and the EU are trending towards socialism and communism, leaving no place safe to escape to, then they will simply need to fight the evil in their own country because soon there may be no better place to go, right? That's a great point, right? Great point from Anki Woe. If you just pick up and leave, if everybody does that, then there may not be any place left to go, which is a scary thought. We have Be Brave here, who says, this Cuba segment is a good prelude to the soon-to-be communist USA. Evil prevails when good men do nothing. That is from Be Brave. Good to see you, Be Brave. I agree with you. That's why we all got to speak up. We all got to stand up and speak up a little bit. Be Brave says, very interesting Cuba segment. Thank you, Be Brave. I know that was a little bit different, not our standard traditional political fare, but I learned a lot from that. You know, it's a really good dichotomy. You can see the difference between capitalism and communism right immediately. I learned a lot. It was impactful. We have Be Brave says, what's the curious thing about Cuba is that big tech isn't censoring the story. There has to be a reason. They want everyone to believe this is about a lack of vaccines. Sure. So yeah, why aren't they? I think is the point. And let's see, Todd Trout is here, says, do Cubans have the right to peaceable assembly? Do they have a Bill of Rights? Not to my knowledge. If they do, I don't think it has the same benefits that we have here in the United States. We have, let's see, Thunder 7 says that hope there's no Tiananmen Square repeat. Just a reminder to wacky AOC that the people who were lucky to flee commie countries value American values of liberty more than any other group. The champagne socialists like her haven't a clue about totalitarian states. Yeah, I really don't think that they do. You know, there's a great Twitter profile called Libs of TikTok, which, by the way, I'm on TikTok now. Check that out. Link is down in the description below. But it is, what was I talking about? Oh, Libs of TikTok. One of the best Twitter follows you'll see. But there are a lot of people out there who just sort of are endeared to communism, but I don't think they've actually ever really studied its practical application. They like the idea of it. I don't have to work and everything's going to be great and I can go be an artist and write poetry and work on my screenplays, but it's not reality. All right, we have Nadarb is here, says, the clip you showed of the Cuban police hopping over that vehicle, can you imagine our police trying to hop their out-of-shape selves over something that tall? And he's laughing in Cuban right there, ha ha ha, with the JA, right? So that's good to see you, Nadarb. Next up, we got Want to Know, says, sounds just like the Portland protests with Freedom running commercials to share your place with someone else, telling how many people can shop at the stores and the cafes, etc. And then lastly on this segment, we've got from a note anonymous, we've got, I don't get it. If Cuba has been living like this for 62 years and people have learned to live in this situation, then why now? What actually happened to trigger this protest? Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. Gonna probably be more information about that. Does it have anything to do with Haiti or anything else? I don't know. Interesting things happening in the world these days. All of those questions came over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Very much appreciate all of your love and support over there.